Parents demanded I give up my master bedroom in the house I pay for their golden boy. So I'm 26M, and for the last year or so, I've been living with my parents in the city. Sounds pretty basic, right? But it's not what you think. This wasn't some move back home because I can't afford rent situation. I'm actually the one who bought the house. I pay the entire mortgage, and I cover all the groceries, bills, everything. My parents, they don't pay a dime. To give you some background, my parents, Liz, 52F, and Tom, 55M, are both retired teachers. They'd been living out in the country for years, but after they stopped working, they decided they wanted to move to the city. They were bored with the quiet life and wanted to be closer to more exciting stuff. Or at least that's what they said. I thought, why not? I'm making good money as a software engineer, and the city has better job opportunities anyway. Plus, I figured I'd help them out since they've done a lot for me growing up, normal family stuff. So, we moved into this nice 3-bedroom house in the city. I'm not talking mansion level or anything, but it's definitely a nice place. 3 bedrooms, a little backyard, and a big enough living room for everyone to hang out. Since I'm the one paying the mortgage, I made sure to claim the master bedroom. It's got a walk-in closet and its own bathroom, which is clutch because, honestly, sharing a bathroom with anyone else? No, thank you. The second bedroom? That's my home office. Since I work from home about 80% of the time, I set it up just the way I wanted. Dual monitors, a comfortable chair, the whole deal. I figured the third bedroom would stay as a guest room for when family visited or whatever. Simple enough, right? At first, everything was fine. My parents were just happy to be in the city, and we all settled into a pretty comfortable routine. They did their thing, gardening, watching TV, whatever retirees do, and I worked my job, paid the bills, and took care of the house. I didn't mind paying for everything. I make 6 figures, and it's not like they have much income coming in besides their pensions. Plus, it's family. You don't charge family rent, right? Then came the turning point. And let me tell you, it all happened faster than I could have imagined. One day my mom dropped this casual comment at breakfast, like it was no big deal. She goes, your brother Jake and Emma are thinking about moving to the city. They're not doing so well back in the old town, and Emma's pregnant, so they could really use the help. At first, I didn't think much of it. Jake, 28M, and Emma, 26F, had always been the kind of couple who jumped from one bad situation to another. They weren't exactly struggling, but they weren't thriving either. Plus, Emma being pregnant threw a whole new layer into the mix. I thought, okay, maybe they'll move to the city and get a small apartment or something. But no, my mom had different plans. A few days later, she sat me down, and with this super innocent tone, she said, "We've invited Jake and Emma to come stay with us. It'll just be for a little while until they get back on their feet." Now, this is the part where I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. I just kind of nodded along, figuring, okay, whatever, they'll stay for a bit and then find their own place. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of the chaos. My parents didn't exactly ask if I was cool with them moving in. They just told me after they'd already invited them. I was still processing the whole thing when Jake and Emma showed up at our doorstep a week later with bags in hand, looking like they were moving in for the long haul. So here's the deal. They move in, and right away, it's clear that they think they're staying indefinitely. I'm already feeling the stress build up because I'm the one paying for everything. Groceries, utilities, mortgage, you name it. And now I've got 2 more people to feed and take care of. No one even asked if I was okay with it. They just moved in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Now don't get me wrong, I love my brother. He's family after all. But Jake's not exactly the most responsible person in the world. He's the kind of guy who always finds himself in messy situations and then relies on other people to bail him out. And Emma, she's nice enough, but she's got this entitled attitude that just rubs me the wrong way. Like she's pregnant, so she automatically deserves special treatment from everyone around her. But here's where things start getting really messed up. A couple of days after they moved in, Emma starts making these little comments. The type that seem harmless but are actually really annoying. She'd say things like, "This place is so big, it must be hard for you to clean it all by yourself," or "I can't wait until the baby's here. We're going to need a lot of space for all the baby stuff." I didn't think too much of it at first, but then came the kicker. One evening, after I'd just finished a long day of work, Jake and Emma pulled me aside and said they wanted to talk. I thought, all right, maybe they're going to apologize for taking up space and eating all the food without offering to help. But nope. Instead, Emma, all casual, says, "So, we've been thinking, it would make more sense for us to take the master bedroom." I just stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We need more space," Jake added, like it was obvious. "The baby's going to need a lot of stuff, And your room has the walk-in closet and the private bathroom. Now keep in mind, I pay for the entire mortgage. The house is in my name. I also pay for all the groceries, and I've been supporting the whole household without asking for anything in return. And here they were, asking me to give up my own bedroom? I was floored. I couldn't even respond right away. It was like the audacity just hit me all at once. Finally, I said, "Why don't you just take the spare room? It's plenty big, and it's already set up for guests." Emma wasn't having it. "But that room doesn't have a walk-in closet, and the baby's going to need space." I stared at them for a few seconds, trying to stay calm. "I'm not giving up my room," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "You can have the spare room, or you can find somewhere else to stay." Jake looked a little shocked that I wasn't just caving in. But Emma? She looked downright offended. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to end well. All right. So after that awkward conversation where Jake and Emma straight up asked me to give up my room, I thought that maybe they'd realize how ridiculous they sounded and back off. I mean, who in their right mind asks the person paying the mortgage, buying the groceries, and keeping the lights on to just give up their space like that? But nope. Of course, that's not what happened. The next couple of days, I started noticing these little things. For one, Jake and Emma were suddenly really comfortable. Like, too comfortable. They'd spread their stuff out all over the living room, had their shoes kicked off near the couch, and Emma was already talking about where she was going to put all the baby stuff, like the house was theirs or something. I wasn't saying anything yet, but it was building up inside me, that feeling that something was about to go down. So, one day I had to go into the office for a few hours. Normally, I work from home, but sometimes I have meetings that I can't miss. Anyway, I get home around lunchtime to grab something to eat, and I notice something strange as soon as I walk in. My stuff, my personal stuff, is in the hallway. My clothes are in a pile on the floor, my computer monitor is just sitting there, unplugged, like someone was in the middle of moving it. My heart's already starting to race because I know what this means, but I had to see it for myself. I walk to my room and sure enough, there's Emma, standing in the middle of it, packing up the last of my things. She doesn't even look surprised when I walk in. She just glances over at me like, "Oh, hey, I was just finishing up." I couldn't believe it. "What the hell are you doing?" I blurt out, probably louder than I meant to. She had the nerve to look all calm and collected, like this was no big deal. "Your mom said we could start moving our stuff in here. The baby's coming soon and we need the space," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I could feel my blood boiling. My mom said? My mom, who doesn't pay a single cent toward the mortgage, thought it was okay to just hand over my room to Jake and Emma, without even talking to me? I wasn't about to let this slide. "No," I said, stepping into the room. "You're not moving into my room. I already told you guys to take the guest room." Emma didn't like that. She crossed her arms and gave me this look, like I was the one being unreasonable. "The guest room is too small for the baby, and there's no closet. We need more space." I wasn't having it. "I don't care. You're not taking my room. I'm the one paying the mortgage. I'm the one who's been paying for everything in this house, and you and Jake aren't even contributing anything. If you need more space, you're welcome to find your own place." At this point, I was really angry, and I could tell Emma was getting upset too, but I didn't care. She didn't back down, though. "Your mom said it was fine," she repeated, like that was the final word. Now, here's where I lost it. I marched back out of the room, grabbed my phone, and called my mom, who, by the way, wasn't even home at the time. The second she answered, I didn't even let her say hello. "Mom, did you tell Jake and Emma they could move into my room?" There was a long pause on the other end, like she didn't know what to say. Finally, she admitted, "Well, I thought it would be the best solution. They need the space, and you already have the office. It's not like you're using the room for much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. "I pay the mortgage, I pay for all the groceries, I pay the bills, and you think it's okay for Jake and Emma to just take over my room?" My mom tried to calm me down, saying it wasn't a big deal and that we're all family, but I was done listening. "I'm not giving them my room, and if they don't move their stuff out, they're going to need to find another place to stay." By this point, Emma must have heard me, because she came storming out of the room, looking furious. "You're seriously going to throw us out? With a baby on the way?" That's when Jake walked in. He must have heard the commotion from outside because he came in looking all pissed off too. "What's going on?" he demanded. So I laid it out for him. "What's going on is your wife thinks she can just take over my room without even asking, and I'm telling you both right now, it's not happening. You can either stay in the guest room or you can leave." Jake wasn't happy about that. He got all defensive, saying how they're family and how I should be willing to make sacrifices for them. But at this point, I was beyond reasoning. Sacrifices? I'm already paying for this entire house. What are you guys contributing, huh? Nothing. And now you think you can just walk in and take over? The yelling got pretty loud at that point, and I think it was clear that neither side was backing down. My mom tried calling me back, but I ignored her. I was too pissed off to deal with her excuses. Jake kept going on and on about how I wasn't being fair, how they had a baby on the way, and how families should stick together in tough times. But I'd had enough. I turned to both of them and said, "You've got until the end of the day to move your stuff out of my room. If you don't, I'll move it out for you." Emma stormed off, slamming the door behind her, and Jake just stood there glaring at me like I was the bad guy. But I didn't care. I wasn't about to let them walk all over me in my own house, especially when I was the one paying for everything. For the rest of the day, I stayed in my office trying to cool down. I didn't want to deal with either of them, and I knew if I went back out there, it would just turn into another argument. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. They weren't going to take this lying down, and I had a feeling my mom would get involved again. But I wasn't about to back down either. Not this time. After that blow-up with Jake and Emma, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally back off. I mean, I was crystal clear. My room wasn't up for grabs, and they either stay in the guest room or find somewhere else to live. Seemed pretty simple to me. But of course, things didn't go that smoothly. The next day, I kept mostly to myself. I wasn't looking for more drama, and honestly, I was still fuming from how things had gone down. I spent most of my time working in the office, trying to pretend like everything was normal. But by the time dinner rolled around, I could feel the tension in the air. It was like everyone was avoiding each other, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I didn't mind the quiet. If Jake and Emma were finally going to stay in the guest room without causing more issues, I figured I could live with that. But then something happened that pushed me over the edge. That evening, I walked into the kitchen to grab some food. I had bought all the groceries, like I always do, but when I opened the fridge, it was practically empty. I'm talking about food I just bought 2 days ago. Gone. I checked the freezer, same deal. I knew my parents didn't eat like that, and it wasn't me, obviously. So who else could it be? Jake and Emma. They'd probably helped themselves to everything without even asking. I was already irritated, but I tried to brush it off, thinking, whatever, I'll just pick up more tomorrow. But it wasn't just the food. When I went to sit down at the table to eat, my mom came into the kitchen, not looking me in the eye. She quietly made plates for herself, my dad, Jake, and Emma. And then, she didn't make one for me. At first, I thought she must have forgotten, so I just kind of waited, but she finished serving everyone and sat down. I was left standing there like an idiot, watching as they all started eating. I'm not going to lie, I felt the anger bubbling up again. It was like they were all punishing me for standing up for myself. I looked at my mom, trying to keep my cool. "You didn't make me a plate?" She barely looked up. "You don't want to help the family, you don't eat with the family," she said, as casually as if she was commenting on the weather. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Excuse me? I pay for everything here. The groceries, the mortgage, and now I'm being iced out?" She didn't even answer. My dad just kind of sighed and kept eating like nothing was happening, which pissed me off even more. Jake and Emma were sitting there with this smug look on their faces, like they had won some kind of power play. Emma even had the nerve to smile at me when I walked by. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't about to be treated like some outsider in the house that I paid for. I slammed the fridge door shut and stormed out of the kitchen, my mind racing. I knew what I had to do next. I went straight to my room, grabbed my laptop, and started looking up eviction notices. I figured if they didn't want to treat me with respect, then they could find somewhere else to live. I mean, enough is enough, right? I'm not a free hotel service. Within an hour, I had the documents ready. I printed out 2 sets, one for Jake and Emma and one for my parents. It felt weird, kicking out my own family, but at this point, they had crossed the line. They'd been disrespecting me for weeks, acting like the house was theirs, and then freezing me out because I wouldn't cave to their ridiculous demands. I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. Once the notices were printed, I walked out to the living room where everyone was sitting, pretending like nothing was wrong. I didn't say a word. I just slapped the papers down in front of my parents, then handed another set to Jake and Emma. "What's this?" Jake asked, picking up the papers and scanning them. "You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. "If you're not out by tomorrow, I'm calling the police." Jake's face went pale. He wasn't expecting this, not at all. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious," I replied. "I'm done with this. You've been freeloading here without contributing a thing, and now you think you can take over my house? No, not anymore." Jake stood up, glaring at me, but I didn't budge. I was taller than him, bigger than him, and I wasn't going to be intimidated by his little temper tantrum. "We're family," he said through gritted teeth. "You can't just throw us out." "Yes, I can," I said, stepping closer. "I'm the one who pays for this house. Not you, not Emma, and not Mom and Dad. If you don't want to be respectful, you don't get to stay here." Emma, of course, started crying, as if that was going to change anything. "I'm pregnant and you're kicking us out? What kind of brother are you?" "I'm the brother who's been paying for everything while you two take advantage of me," I shot back. "You have 24 hours. That's more than generous." Jake looked like he wanted to argue more, but I could see the realization starting to sink in. I wasn't bluffing. My mom, who had been sitting there quietly this whole time, finally spoke up. "You can't do this, honey. They're your brother and sister-in-law. This is family." But I didn't care anymore. "I've already done it," I said, pointing to the eviction notice in her hands. "You've got 30 days to find somewhere else, too. If you're not gone by then, I'll be taking legal action." The room went dead quiet after that. My dad didn't say a word, just sat there staring at the table like he didn't know what to do. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't backing down. This wasn't about being nice anymore. This was about standing up for myself and not letting them walk all over me. After a few long minutes, I walked back to my room, leaving them to process everything. I locked my door, sat down at my desk, and took a deep breath. I'd just done something I never thought I'd have to do, kick out my own family. But you know what? It felt good. It felt right. I wasn't going to be taken advantage of anymore. The house was dead quiet for the rest of the night. No one came to my door. No one tried to argue with me. I think they all realized that I wasn't messing around anymore. If they didn't respect me, they didn't deserve to live here. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Update 1. After handing out those eviction notices, I figured the tension in the house would either explode or everyone would finally back off and take me seriously. Either way, I knew there was no going back. I'd drawn my line in the sand, and I wasn't about to let anyone step over it again. But instead of the blow-up I was expecting, the house got quiet. Too quiet, honestly. The morning after, I woke up early, earlier than usual, just because I couldn't really sleep. I guess I was kind of waiting for something to happen. You know, like maybe Jake would come banging on my door demanding I change my mind, or maybe my parents would start pleading with me to reconsider. But none of that happened. When I finally walked into the kitchen to make breakfast, it was empty. No one was up yet. No Jake, no Emma, no parents. For a second, I thought maybe they had packed up in the middle of the night and left without saying anything, but I knew that was just wishful thinking. I made my coffee, sat down at the table, and waited. I wasn't in the mood to make small talk, and I wasn't in the mood to explain myself again. What I'd done was necessary. They'd pushed me too far, and there was no way I could keep living like that. They didn't respect me, and they sure as hell didn't respect the fact that I was paying for everything. All I wanted was some basic decency, and they couldn't even give me that. After a while, my mom came into the kitchen, her face looking like she'd barely slept. She didn't say anything at first, just grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. It was the first time we'd really been alone since I handed her the eviction notice. The awkward silence hung in the air for what felt like forever, before she finally spoke up. "Honey," she started, her voice soft and tired, "I know things have gotten out of hand." I didn't say anything. I just stared at my coffee, waiting for the rest of whatever she was going to say. I knew an apology was coming, or at least some version of one, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. "I didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and your brother," she continued, her voice cracking just a little. "We were just trying to help them, and I guess I didn't see how unfair it was to you." That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to admit it, at least not so soon. For a second, I thought maybe she was finally getting it, that I wasn't the villain in this situation. But I still couldn't shake off the frustration from how everything had gone down. "You didn't just ignore what I wanted," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You sided with them every single time. Like, you just assumed I'd roll over and let them take whatever they wanted." "I know," she said, almost in a whisper. "But we thought, well, you've always been the strong one, Jake. He's never had it easy." That was her excuse every time. Jake wasn't strong. Jake had struggled more. Jake needed more support. It was like they didn't think I had any limits because I was the one who had my life together. "And you think I've had it easy?" I asked, my anger simmering just below the surface. "I'm the one who bought this house. I'm the one who pays the mortgage. I pay for the groceries. I've been carrying all of you, and you think I can just keep doing that forever?" She looked down at her coffee, not saying anything for a few seconds. "I know you've done a lot, more than we could have asked for, but Jake, with the baby on the way. I cut her off. This isn't about the baby. This is about respect, and you guys haven't shown me any. She sighed, clearly exhausted by the whole situation, but I wasn't about to let her off with a few tired excuses. You know, we just thought we were doing the right thing, she finally said. Jake and Emma, they don't have much. And whose fault is that? I shot back. I didn't ask them to move in. I didn't ask for any of this. They need to figure out their own lives, and you can't keep bailing them out by throwing me under the bus. She nodded, finally seeming to understand, or at least trying to. We'll figure something out, she said, her voice quieter now. But please, don't push us out. Not like this. I sat back in my chair, trying to calm down. It wasn't like I wanted to kick them out. I mean, they were my parents. But at the same time, I couldn't keep living in a situation where they didn't respect my boundaries. I'd let too much slide, and now I had to put my foot down. I don't want to push you out, I said, trying to be as calm as I could. But things need to change. I can't keep living like this, being treated like I don't matter in my own house. Either things change or yeah, you'll have to find somewhere else to live. She didn't argue, just nodded quietly. Okay, she said. We'll figure something out. After that, she left the kitchen, and I was alone again with my thoughts. I wasn't sure if anything was actually going to change, but at least it seemed like they were finally starting to take me seriously. Jake and Emma hadn't shown their faces yet, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. But either way, they were on borrowed time. Later that afternoon, Jake finally showed up, and of course, he looked like he'd been brooding over what had happened the night before. He didn't even say hi when he walked into the living room, just sat down across from me with that same pissed-off expression he always had when he didn't get his way. So, this is how it's gonna be? He asked, his voice dripping with bitterness. You're really gonna kick us out? I gave you 24 hours, I said, not even looking up from my phone. If you're still here tomorrow, I'm calling the police. Jake scoffed, shaking his head like I was the bad guy. We're family. Yeah, and family doesn't take advantage of each other, I shot back. You've had weeks to figure this out. I'm not your fallback plan. He didn't have much to say after that, just sat there for a few minutes before getting up and storming off again. Typical Jake. He was always the type to run when things didn't go his way, and this time was no different. The rest of the day went by quietly. Too quietly, if I'm being honest. I didn't know what Jake and Emma were going to do, but I wasn't about to change my mind. I'd given them a clear deadline, and they knew I wasn't bluffing. The next 24 hours were going to decide everything. Update 2. The next morning after all the chaos, I woke up and just laid there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. I knew today was the day. Jake and Emma had 24 hours, and now that deadline was ticking away. It was weird, though. I wasn't even mad anymore. I'd already accepted what had to happen, and at this point, it was more about following through. When I got up and headed into the kitchen, I noticed right away that the house felt different. Not tense exactly, but just quiet, like the calm before something big happens. No one was in the kitchen, so I figured I'd make myself some breakfast. The fridge was still kind of empty from the last raid Jake and Emma had on the groceries, but I made do with what was left. As I sat there eating, I started thinking about how this whole situation had spiraled out of control so fast. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that things were fine. My parents and I were getting along, I was working, paying the mortgage, covering the groceries, and life was just kind of moving along like normal. Then Jake and Emma show up, and everything went off the rails. It's crazy how fast things can change when people start feeling entitled to stuff they didn't earn. A couple hours later, I heard someone coming down the hallway. It was my dad. He walked in quietly, grabbed a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table across from me. He didn't say anything at first, just took a sip and looked out the window. Finally, he spoke. Jake and Emma are leaving today. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if he was telling me because they had decided to leave on their own or if he was just reminding me of the deadline. Either way, I nodded and kept eating. They don't have anywhere to go, he continued, his voice low. They're going to stay at a motel for a while until they figure things out. I stopped mid-bite and looked at him. Part of me felt bad, but the bigger part of me knew this was what had to happen. I'd been too nice for too long, and if I didn't put my foot down now, they'd just keep taking advantage. I gave them time, I said, keeping my voice steady. I didn't want it to come to this, but they left me no choice. He didn't argue, didn't try to guilt-trip me, which was surprising. He just nodded and kept drinking his coffee. I think he finally understood that I wasn't going to back down this time. After everything that had happened, there was no going back to how things were. Around noon, Jake and Emma started packing their things. I stayed in my room for most of it, not wanting to get into another argument or hear any more passive-aggressive comments. But after a while, I could hear Jake's voice getting louder from down the hall, so I knew it was only a matter of time before something went down. Sure enough, not long after, Jake knocked on my door. I opened it, and he stood there with that same pissed-off look he'd had since I gave him the eviction notice. "You're really gonna let this happen?" he asked, his voice sharp. "You're just gonna kick us out like this?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I gave you 24 hours. I told you what needed to happen." He shook his head, his jaw clenched. "We're family, man. You don't do this to family." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Family doesn't take advantage of each other. I'm not just kicking you out for no reason. You've been freeloading here for weeks without contributing anything. I've been paying the mortgage, the groceries, everything. And instead of being grateful, you tried to take my room and push me out of my own house. I'm not going to let that happen." Jake didn't say anything for a few seconds. I could tell he was mad, but there was nothing left for him to argue. He knew I was right, even if he didn't want to admit it. "So that's it, huh?" he finally muttered. "You're just throwing us out." "I'm giving you the same option I gave you yesterday," I replied. "You can find a way to live somewhere else, or you can stay in the guest room and actually respect me and my space. But if you can't do that, then yeah, you're leaving." Jake glared at me, then turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door and let out a long breath. It was exhausting, but I knew it had to be done. By mid-afternoon, Jake and Emma were gone. I didn't see them leave, and honestly, I didn't want to. I wasn't looking for some emotional goodbye or anything like that. They packed up their stuff, loaded it into their car, and drove off without saying a word to me. The house felt different after they left, quieter, less tense. My parents didn't say much to me that day. I think they were still processing everything that had happened. My mom looked upset, but she didn't say anything about it. Maybe she realized, finally, that I wasn't the one who had caused all this. Jake and Emma had pushed me too far, and this was the result. That evening, my mom knocked on my door. She came in, sat down on the edge of my bed, and just stared at the floor for a while. I could tell she was trying to find the right words. "They're gone," she said softly. I nodded, not saying anything. "I never thought it would get to this point," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you." I looked at her, feeling some of the frustration lift a little. "It's not that I didn't want to help," I explained, "but you guys treated me like I didn't matter, like my needs and my space weren't important." She sighed and nodded. "You're right. We should have seen it sooner." We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could tell she was upset, but at least now she was starting to understand where I was coming from. "I don't want you and Dad to leave," I said, breaking the silence. "But if things don't change, I can't live like this." She nodded again, standing up slowly. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Things will be different, I promise." As she left the room, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The situation with Jake and Emma was over, but there was still work to be done with my parents. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but at least now it felt like they were willing to listen. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house was quiet, and the tension that had been hanging in the air was gone. It wasn't a perfect solution, but at least now I had my space back. And most importantly, I had my respect. Parents kicked me out just because the golden child sister couldn't stand me. 10 years ago, my life basically got flipped upside down because my family, especially my sister Claire, decided to kick me out of the house. And why? Because they thought I was some sort of traitor for figuring out how to pay for my college tuition without their help. I was 18, just about to start college, and suddenly I found myself with nowhere to go. This all happened thanks to Claire, the golden child who always managed to make me look like I was barely worth anything in comparison. Claire is 4 years older than me, and from the time we were kids, it was clear that she was the favorite. Like, not just a little bit. I mean, my parents were obsessed with her. If she got an A, they'd throw her a freaking parade. But if I got an A, it was like, "Oh, cool. What's for dinner?" You get the idea. So I kind of grew up with the mentality that it didn't matter what I did because Claire would always outshine me. By the time she went off to a top business school, my parents were all over it, like she was some sort of prodigy. They paid for everything: her tuition, her apartment, her fancy clothes. Meanwhile, I kept my head down and figured I'd have to do things on my own. So when I got accepted into a reputable college in the UK to study history, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get a little bit of support. But nope, that wasn't happening. My parents straight up told me they couldn't afford my tuition, which, okay, I get it. College is expensive. But what really pissed me off was that they didn't even want to co-sign a loan. I wasn't asking them to pay the whole thing, just to help me out so I wouldn't be drowning in debt my whole life. But they refused, and we fought about it a lot. Their reasoning? We already paid for Claire's college. We have to think about our future now. Oh, and they were also planning to start some kind of small business around that time, so apparently all their savings were going into that. I was completely stuck. I didn't want to lose the opportunity to go to this college, but it felt like my parents were just throwing obstacles in my way for no reason. They had no problem spending tons of money on Claire, but when it came to me, suddenly they had to be frugal and responsible. I needed help, and it became pretty obvious that they weren't going to give it to me. So, with no other options, I turned to my Aunt Denise. Now, Denise is my dad's older sister, and let me just say, she's like the total opposite of my parents. She's a neurosurgeon and, honestly, way more successful than either of them, but she's also super down to earth. My parents always had this weird tension with her. They'd act all polite at family gatherings, but I could tell they were bitter about how successful she was compared to them. My dad, in particular, hated feeling like she overshadowed him. I didn't really want to get her involved at first, but I was desperate. I reached out to her one day, asking if she'd be willing to help me with the tuition. She didn't even hesitate. She was like, "Of course I'll help. Why didn't you come to me sooner?" But I was terrified that my dad would find out. If he knew I had gone behind his back to ask for money from his sister, he'd lose his mind. So I begged Denise to keep it a secret. Things were fine for a while after that. I figured I was in the clear. My tuition was covered, and I was getting ready to leave for school. That's when Claire decided to ruin everything. To this day, I still don't know how she found out about me asking Aunt Denise for help, but she did. And being Claire, she couldn't just let it go. She had to blow it up into this huge, dramatic thing. One night, I came home after hanging out with some friends, and immediately I knew something was off. All my stuff was packed up in boxes. Everything. My clothes, my books, even my bedding. My parents were sitting in the living room, and Claire was standing there with this smug, self-satisfied look on her face. It felt like I had walked into some twisted intervention. My dad didn't waste any time. He threw a stack of papers at me and said, "Explain this." I had no idea what he was talking about, so I looked at the papers, and that's when I realized Claire had gone full psycho. She had fabricated these fake emails between me and Aunt Denise, where it looked like I was betraying the family, leaking details about the business my parents were planning to start in exchange for Aunt Denise paying for my tuition. I couldn't believe my eyes. Claire had gone through my laptop, found some emails between me and Denise, and then doctored them using Photoshop or whatever. She made it look like I had sold out our family. I was stunned. I tried to explain that it was all fake, but my parents didn't even listen. They just stood there saying, "We trusted you, and you stabbed us in the back." It didn't matter what I said. They believed Claire, because of course they did. They always believed her. It was like I didn't even exist anymore. They told me to pack my things and leave, right then and there. I was officially kicked out of the house because of a complete lie. I begged them to reconsider. I didn't want to be a burden on Aunt Denise, especially after she had already agreed to pay for my tuition. But my parents didn't care. They said I was a traitor, and they wanted nothing to do with me. So that was it. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a few boxes of my stuff, and I moved in with Aunt Denise. Honestly, I don't know how I would have survived if it weren't for her. She took me in without a second thought and treated me like actual family, something I hadn't felt in years. While my parents were busy worshiping Claire and focusing on their future business, Denise was the only one who really cared about me, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But to this day, I can't shake the memory of that night. Walking into my house and seeing all my stuff packed up, my parents staring at me like I was a criminal, and Claire standing there with that smug look on her face knowing she had won. So there I was, kicked out of my own house, standing on Aunt Denise's doorstep with my life in boxes. I was still processing what the hell had just happened. It felt like a bad dream. I mean, how do you go from thinking you're part of a family to being homeless in one night? The whole thing was so surreal, but at the same time, I couldn't say I was that surprised. My parents had always made it clear that Claire came first, but I guess I never thought they'd take it this far. Denise, being the angel that she is, welcomed me with open arms. She didn't ask a million questions. She didn't pry. She just saw that I was hurting and told me that her house was my house for as long as I needed. That kind of kindness? Man, it hit me right in the gut because I realized right then that I had never felt anything close to that from my own parents. So, I moved in with her. It was strange at first, waking up in her guest room, looking around at a house that wasn't mine, but over time, it started to feel more like home than the place I grew up in ever had. We started getting closer, talking more about everything. Turns out, Aunt Denise knew a lot more about my parents and their BS than I ever realized. She'd been keeping her distance from them for years, only showing up to family events because she felt obligated. She told me something that blew my mind. Apparently, my dad's grudge against her started way before I was born. Denise had always been more successful. She went to med school, got married to a great guy, who unfortunately passed away young, and was living her life. Meanwhile, my dad was doing okay, but every time they met up, he'd get weirdly competitive. Denise said that their relationship basically became a game of who could look better to the rest of the family, but instead of just being proud of his sister, he resented her. And it wasn't just career stuff. My dad felt overshadowed in every way, financially, socially, everything. I guess that jealousy bled over into how he treated me. Denise had figured all this out years ago but kept quiet because she didn't want to make things worse for me. Now that I was living with her, though, she told me everything. It was like she was trying to fill in all the gaps in my life that I hadn't been able to make sense of before. Why my parents never seemed to care about what I did, why they always bent over backward for Claire. It all boiled down to some weird family dynamic that I didn't even know existed. Living with Denise was great, but the thing is, I couldn't completely relax. I kept waiting for my parents to call, for Claire to show up out of nowhere, or for them to apologize for what they did. But of course, that never happened. Days turned into weeks, and nothing. Not a single text, not a single call. At first I was angry. Like, really angry. How could they just toss me aside like I was nothing? Then the anger kind of faded and I started to feel numb about the whole thing. It was like my brain was shutting off all my emotions just so I could function. Denise, though, she was amazing. She never pushed me to talk about what happened unless I wanted to. She let me take my time figuring things out. She even helped me get all my stuff sorted for school, making sure I had everything I needed before I left for the UK. I swear, if it weren't for her, I don't know how I would have gotten through that time. But even with her support, the silence from my parents was deafening. You'd think after kicking your kid out, you'd at least check up on them, right? But no. I guess I shouldn't have expected anything different, but I still did. One afternoon, about a month after the whole ordeal, I got a text from Claire. I remember it so clearly because it was just as obnoxious as she was. All it said was, "Hope you're doing okay. By the way, don't leave your laptop lying around." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a little smirk in text form, reminding me that she was the one who got me thrown out. I stared at the screen, feeling my blood boil. She was taunting me, plain and simple. I didn't respond. What was the point? Claire wasn't the type to feel guilty about anything. In her mind, she had won some weird family game, and that was that. I thought about texting back something snarky, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She'd just get off on it. So I blocked her number and tried to move on. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at my phone, part of me was still waiting for something from my parents. Maybe a message from my mom, saying she regretted everything, or even a passive-aggressive email from my dad, pretending like nothing happened. But nope, radio silence. In the months that followed, Denise and I got into a solid routine. She became more than just my aunt. She became my confidant, my friend, and basically the only family I had left. I started to see how messed up my parents really were. They'd spent so long focusing on Claire, trying to mold her into some perfect daughter, that they completely missed out on everything else. And when Claire finally messed up, which she eventually would, it would be too late for them to fix it. Around the time I was getting ready to leave for school, I got another message, this time from my dad. It was short and direct. "Good luck in the UK." That was it. No apology, no explanation, nothing. It felt like a slap in the face. After everything, all he had to say was "good luck"? I didn't even know how to respond, so I didn't. I just deleted the message and tried not to think about it. The day I left for the UK, Denise drove me to the airport. She hugged me and told me how proud she was, how she knew I'd do great things. It was the first time in my life that someone in my family had said those words to me, and it hit me harder than I expected. I got on that plane feeling like I was leaving more than just my home behind. I was leaving behind the part of me that had always tried to seek approval from my parents. From that moment on, I decided I didn't need them anymore. I had Denise, I had my future, and I had myself. If they wanted to reach out, fine, but I wasn't going to waste any more energy chasing after people who clearly didn't care about me. I was done. So life in the UK was going great. I settled into college, made some friends, and for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly thinking about my family. I won't say I forgot about them, I don't think that's possible, but they definitely weren't on my mind as much anymore. I was focused on my studies, figuring out my future, and just trying to enjoy life without the drama that came with living under my parents' shadow. But of course, just when things were going smoothly, something had to come and mess it up. I finished college and I came back to my city. I found a very good high-paying job, and then I got a call from my mom. Yeah, my mom. The same woman who hadn't spoken to me since the day they kicked me out. It was totally unexpected. I was sitting in my dorm room going over some notes for a paper when my phone buzzed. I saw her name pop up, and for a second I thought I was seeing things. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Should I answer it? Ignore it? After everything that had happened, why would she be calling me now? I let it ring a few more times, and then, against my better judgment, I picked up. Hello? I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was pounding. There was a pause on the other end, like she wasn't sure what to say. Finally, she spoke. Hi, it's your mother. No kidding. Who else would it be? I didn't say that, though. I just stayed quiet, waiting for her to explain why she was calling after almost 2 years of nothing. She hesitated again, and then out of nowhere she said, "We need to talk." I couldn't help but scoff. Now she wanted to talk. After everything, it was so typical of her. But even though I was annoyed, a part of me was curious. What could possibly be so important that she was reaching out after all this time? About what? I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Your father and I, we want to see you, she said, stumbling over her words like she was trying to figure out how to phrase it right. I could already tell where this was going. They didn't actually want to see me because they missed me or felt bad for kicking me out. There was something they needed, and I had a pretty good guess about what it was. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Why? I asked bluntly. She didn't answer right away, which pretty much confirmed my suspicions. When she finally did speak, her voice was quieter, like she was trying to sound all motherly and concerned. Your dad and I, we've been going through a hard time. Things haven't been easy since the pandemic. There it was, the real reason behind the call. It was exactly what I thought. Money problems. I hadn't heard much about their business since I left, but I knew it wasn't doing well. Denise had mentioned something in passing about how their shop wasn't thriving the way they had expected, and with the pandemic, it made sense that they'd be struggling. But I wasn't going to jump in and save them. Not after everything they had done to me. Okay, and, I said, my voice flat. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. Your sister, Claire, she's been managing things for us, but, she started, and that's when I cut her off. Let me guess, I said, already knowing where this was headed. Claire screwed it all up? There was a long pause on her end, which was answer enough. Of course, Claire had messed it up. I don't know why they were surprised. She was always more interested in looking good than actually doing the hard work. They had put all their faith in her, and now it was backfiring. My mom let out a shaky breath. Things haven't been going as planned, she admitted, and we need help. I laughed. I couldn't help it. After everything, after throwing me out, cutting me off, letting Claire walk all over me, now they wanted my help? The audacity of it all was unreal. Unbelievable, I muttered under my breath. What's so funny? My mom asked, sounding genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why I wasn't jumping at the chance to swoop in and save the day. You're serious? You actually think I'm going to help you? I said, my voice rising. I could feel the anger bubbling up, all the emotions I'd been pushing down for the past 2 years coming to the surface. We're your parents, she said, her voice wavering. We made mistakes, but we need you. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You didn't just make mistakes, Mom. You kicked me out of the house. You believed Claire's lies over your own son. You haven't spoken to me in years, and now you need me. And suddenly, I'm supposed to drop everything and come running? She was quiet after that. I could tell she didn't know what to say. She probably wasn't used to me standing up for myself like this. Back when I was still living at home, I would have just gone along with whatever they said, hoping it would keep the peace. But not anymore. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. Finally, she spoke, but her tone had changed. She wasn't trying to be all soft and caring anymore. Now she sounded irritated, like she couldn't believe I was being so difficult. We're still your family, she said sharply. You owe us at least that much. That was it. That was the final straw. I didn't owe them anything. In fact, they were the ones who owed me. An apology, for starters. But I wasn't holding my breath on that one. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said, my voice cold. If you need help, go ask Claire. She's your golden child, remember? Without waiting for her to respond, I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally said what I needed to say. They could figure out their mess on their own. I wasn't going to be part of it. That night, I called Aunt Denise and told her what happened. She wasn't surprised at all. "They've been relying on Claire for years," she said. "It was only a matter of time before it all caught up to them." We talked for a while, and by the end of the call, I felt even more certain that I'd made the right decision. My parents had chosen Claire over me, and now they were paying the price. As harsh as it sounded, it wasn't my responsibility to fix their mistakes. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need their approval or their acceptance. I had my own life now, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their toxic mess. I had done my part by surviving their betrayal. Now, it was their turn to deal with the consequences. Update 1. I thought I was done with all the family drama after that phone call with my mom. Honestly, I felt pretty good about how things went. I had finally stood up for myself and made it clear that I wasn't going to be their safety net. I figured they'd just give up and go back to depending on Claire, but I underestimated my sister's ability to stir the pot. Because, of course, Claire wasn't going to let me get away that easily. It was about 2 weeks after the call with my mom when something weird happened. I was having a pretty normal Saturday afternoon just cleaning up around my place when I heard a knock on the door. Now, I don't really get visitors. I live alone, and most of my friends know to text before they come over, so I was a little confused. I peeked through the peephole, and guess who was standing outside? Yep, Claire. For a second, I thought maybe I was seeing things. Like, what was she doing here? She hadn't spoken to me in years except for that one stupid text about my laptop, and now she was just showing up at my door like everything was fine. My gut reaction was to just ignore her, but I knew Claire well enough to know that she wouldn't leave until she got what she wanted. I opened the door, and before I could even say anything, she smiled, like we were best friends or something. "Hey," she said, all bubbly and fake. "It's been a while." I just stared at her for a second, completely caught off guard. Yeah, it has. "What are you doing here, Claire?" She looked at me with this overly sweet expression, like she thought she could charm her way into my good graces. "I wanted to talk," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Can I come in?" I crossed my arms, not moving from the doorway. "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Come on, can we just talk inside? It's important." I should have said no. I should have just told her to leave right then and there. But my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped aside and let her in, though I didn't bother making her feel welcome. I didn't offer her a seat, and I didn't ask if she wanted anything to drink. She was lucky I was even letting her into my space after everything she'd done. She walked in and looked around, like she was taking in the place. "Nice apartment," she said, like she was trying to make small talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for pleasantries. "Okay, Claire," I said, getting straight to the point. "What do you want?" She sighed dramatically, like she was already exhausted from whatever game she was playing. "Mom told me about your conversation," she said, folding her arms. "She's pretty upset, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Upset? She kicked me out of the house, Claire. What exactly does she have to be upset about?" Claire rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, I'm not here to rehash all that. We both know you've always been difficult." I almost laughed at how casually she said that. "Difficult?" I repeated. "Are you serious right now? You fabricated emails to get me kicked out of the house. That's difficult." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's ancient history. I came here because I want to make things right." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "You want to make things right?" I asked, skepticism dripping from every word. "Yeah," she said, nodding like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I know things got complicated with the family, and maybe I overreacted back then, but I think it's time to put all that behind us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think you overreacted?" I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "Claire, you destroyed my relationship with our parents. You lied about me, manipulated them, and now you're standing here like none of that matters anymore." Her smile faded a little, and I could see that she was getting frustrated. "I didn't come here to argue, okay? I came because I need your help." Ah, there it was. The real reason she was standing in my apartment. Of course, Claire wasn't here to apologize or to make amends. She needed something from me. I felt my jaw clench as I stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "I've been trying to keep the business going," she said, finally dropping the fake sweetness. "But it's been really hard. The pandemic hit us pretty badly, and I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough. Mom and Dad don't want to admit it, but we're on the verge of losing everything." I crossed my arms, not feeling an ounce of sympathy. So, let me guess, you want me to help bail you out? Claire shifted uncomfortably. I'm not asking for a handout, she said defensively. I just thought we could, I don't know, figure something out together. You're doing well for yourself, right? I figured you'd want to help the family. I couldn't believe her. She was trying to guilt trip me into saving the family business that she had driven into the ground. You figured wrong, I said flatly. Claire blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Wait, what do you mean? I mean, I'm not helping you, I said, my voice firm. Not after everything you did. You ruined my life, Claire. You turned my own parents against me. And now that you're in trouble, you think I'm just going to forget all of that and swoop in to save you? No. She stared at me dumbfounded. For the first time in her life, Claire didn't seem to know what to say. But we're family, she said weakly, her voice losing some of its confidence. I shook my head. We stopped being family the day you made it your mission to destroy me. Claire's face went pale. She wasn't used to hearing no, and I could tell she was struggling to process it. After a long, awkward silence, she stood up. Fine, she said coldly, if that's how you want it. That's how it's going to be, I said, standing my ground. You made your choices, Claire. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Without another word, she stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a minute, letting the tension drain out of me. Part of me felt bad, like maybe I was too harsh. But then I remembered everything she'd put me through, and that guilt faded fast. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. I wasn't living in Claire's shadow anymore. I wasn't the second choice or the scapegoat. I was finally free from all of it. Update 2. I thought that after Claire stormed out of my apartment, things would go quiet. Like, she would finally get the message that I was done with her and the whole family drama. But of course, I underestimated just how stubborn she could be. It wasn't even a full week later when the next wave hit. And this time, it wasn't Claire knocking on my door. It was both my parents. It was a Saturday again. Funny how these things always seem to happen on my days off. I was just sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when the knock came. It wasn't soft either. It was one of those heavy, insistent knocks that tells you whoever's on the other side isn't leaving anytime soon. I got up, already having a feeling about who it might be, and when I opened the door, there they were, my mom and dad, standing together like some kind of united front. My dad looked uncomfortable, like he didn't really want to be there. But my mom? She had that look in her eye, the one that said she was determined to fix whatever mess had been made, even if it meant bulldozing her way through. I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. What do you want? My mom gave me a strained smile, trying to keep things friendly, I guess. Can we come in and talk? We need to sort some things out. I was tempted to slam the door in their faces, but part of me figured that if I didn't let them in now, they'd just keep showing up. So, with an exaggerated sigh, I stepped aside and let them in. They walked in, glancing around the place like they were expecting something more than a basic apartment. My dad stayed quiet, but my mom went straight for the couch, sitting down and patting the seat next to her like I was some little kid she was trying to console. I'll stand, I said flatly, crossing my arms. All right, she said with a tight smile. Look, we know things have been difficult between us. Difficult? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's what you're calling it? My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and gruff. We didn't come here to argue. Then what did you come here for? I asked, not even bothering to hide my frustration. Because I'm pretty sure we've already been over everything. Claire tried, you tried, and I made myself clear. I'm not helping. My mom's smile wavered a little. She probably wasn't used to me talking back like this. That's not why we're here, she said, leaning forward slightly. We're here because we want to apologize. I almost laughed. Apologize? For what exactly? Kicking me out? Believing Claire's lies? Or was it that you didn't even bother checking in on me for 2 years? My mom's face tightened, and my dad shifted uncomfortably, looking like he wanted to be anywhere but here. It was clear they weren't expecting me to throw it back in their faces like that. We know we made mistakes, my mom said, her voice quieter now. But we're family, and family has to stick together. I could feel my patience wearing thin. This was just more of the same. Every time something went wrong, they'd pull out the family card like it was supposed to erase everything that happened. But I wasn't falling for it this time. You guys are only here because you need something from me, I said bluntly. If things hadn't gone south with the business, I wouldn't even be hearing from you. Let's not pretend this is about family. There was a moment of silence, and then my dad finally spoke up, his voice rough, but more honest than anything I'd heard from him in years. You're right. That caught me off guard. I blinked, staring at him. What? You're right. he repeated, sighing heavily. We screwed up. We believed Claire, we pushed you out, and we didn't even think twice about it. And now, well, now things are falling apart and we're desperate. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting him to actually admit it. My mom, on the other hand, looked like she was trying not to lose her cool. Clearly, she hadn't planned for him to just lay it all out like that. I appreciate the honesty, I said after a long pause. But that doesn't change anything. My mom cut in then, her voice sharper. It doesn't change the fact that we need you, and you owe us, after everything we've done for you. And there it was again, that sense of entitlement. They really believed I owed them something just because they were my parents. Like all the years of neglect and favoritism didn't matter, and now that they were in trouble, I was supposed to bail them out. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice cold. Not after the way you treated me. You made your choice when you believed Claire over me, when you threw me out and didn't even check if I was okay. Now you want me to save you? That's not how this works. My dad didn't say anything. He just sat there staring at the floor like he was ashamed. But my mom? She wasn't done yet. We're your parents, she said, her voice rising. We raised you, we took care of you, and now you're just going to abandon us? I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for her at this point. You didn't take care of me. Aunt Denise did. You chose Claire, and now you're stuck with her. That's on you. My mom looked like she was about to explode, but my dad put a hand on her arm, stopping her from saying whatever was about to come out of her mouth. He stood up, looking me in the eye for the first time since they walked in. We understand, he said, his voice steady but sad. We're not going to push you anymore. We just needed to try. For a second, I almost felt bad for him. But then I remembered everything they had put me through, and that sympathy disappeared. I hope you figure it out, I said, stepping toward the door and opening it for them. But I'm not going to be part of it. My dad nodded, like he'd expected that. My mom, though, gave me one last look, half angry, half pleading. But when she saw I wasn't budging, she stood up and followed him out. As they left, I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in. I'd done it. I had finally stood up to them, and for the first time it felt like I was really free.